Chevy is called the heartbeat of America for a reason. With SUVs made to move with your rhythm. The versatile Equinox tackles your entire day. The spacious Traverse fits your crew and your whole weekend. And Trax brings style with value you can count on. All infused with tech that has your back, so your drive always hits the right chord. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive.
Hey, it's Stephen Hale here from the Nashville Banner. It's the third week of the month, which means I'm here with my colleague Stephen Elliott to talk about the Metro Council. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. We got to hit convention center money, drones, right turns on red maybe a little, and some vice mayoral chatter. But first, Stephen, listeners may not know this, but you and I would go way back when we were at the scene together, and I went back and read this recently. You wrote a Best of Nashville entry in 2021.
Oh, boy.
Naming Tempo the Coyote of Nashville SC as the city's best-looking mascot.
Okay.
You remember this?
Yes, vividly.
So this is a topic you're passionate about. We're a little late on this, but we haven't had a pod since. I need to get your analysis of the Tennessee Titans makeover of T-Rac. Have you seen this?
I have. It's a little uncanny. Yeah, thank you for showing that. The hyper-realism is interesting. I do think it matches with tempo to a degree.
Yes.
I'm curious to see what the sounds respond with. If what's the chicken's name?
Oh yeah,
Rooster.
Rooster
or
Booster.
Booster.
Or
Booster.
something like that.
If they're going to give Booster muscles, that could be interesting.
That's a good point. There's kind of two ways you can go with the mascot. You can go realistic or cartoonish. I like cartoonish, but I also, given these Nashville, I like that even though their actual names aren't like raccoons or coyotes, I like that we're leaning into the sort of Tennessee vermin.
Mm-hmm.
And also, speaking of which, the Vermin Sanctuary, which is out by where I live, shout out, posted these photos of T-Rac with an actual raccoon named Gizzard.
Yes.
And as you guys will remember, I have met Gizzard and also held him.
Is this like a local celebrity raccoon?
Yeah, he gets around. Gizzard will make appearances, and I guess if you're rebranding your raccoon mascot,
I've always loved raccoons.
You get Gizzard out. I used to find them kind of frightening, but the more you kind of learn about them, it's like, if you see one in the wild, you probably don't want to just try to go and befriend it. But in general, they seem pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Jimothy, real into him, as we've talked about.
Okay, yeah. I'm a little lost on the Jimothy, but I'm vaguely aware.
We can't get into it right now because we've got other stuff to talk about. But so Metro Council.
That was a smooth transition.
Yeah. You start talking about Jimothy, we'll be here all day. I've got a heart out. The Metro Council, have you ever seen any like raccoons or possums or something when you walk out of the Metro Council, actually, when you walk out of the courthouse?
I don't think so.
Because there is some trees there. When I would go to Metro Council meetings, sometimes I would park by the river down there.
Yeah. And
you get down there at night, you start seeing some critters.
There could be a critter or two.
Which reminds me, we've talked about this, that one of these podcasts we're gonna record like live from the courthouse or outside the courthouse after.
Okay.
Like 1 a.m. just breaking it down.
Set up a table.
Yeah.
Let's choose the latest one.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you get out before 10, we're like, nah, this isn't good enough. Another thing you and I love to talk about is movies. I love a movie called Margin Call, which I think you've seen. You seen Margin Call? It's about the stock crash of
was that
a whatever
HBO movie?
No, but it's similar vibe in that it's sort of like about a real life event, but it's fictionalized. But it's basically about these traders in a Wall Street firm who discover what's going on and that everything's about to go haywire. Anyway, I bring it up because Jeremy Irons in that movie, they have a like middle of the night meeting where they're presenting to him how everything's about to hit the fan. And he looks at one of the analysts and he says, I want you to explain this to me as you would to a golden retriever. That's what I need you to do for me and our audience about the convention center financing situation. Mm-hmm. I read your coverage. I watched some of the discussion of the council, so I'm sort of coming around. But what's the deal there? What's happening?
Okay. Well, it might be a bit of a game of telephone because I am not a financial expert.
Same.
But I've done my best to learn about this. So I'll explain it in my words, and then maybe we'll get a call from
Right.
some bond attorney or a banker or a city finance person that says you're way off on this. Basically, you'll remember perhaps when they built the Music City Center nearby where we're recording more than a decade ago, the financing was structured in a sort of complicated way. But the goal was to use money from tourism to pay for this structure rather than local money.
Right. So like taxes on when people buy hotel rooms or stay.
Yeah, hotel rooms, rental cars, trips to the airport, and also sales tax that's collected on the property, which is fairly significant. I mean, it's not the biggest piece of the pie, but it's at the Music City Center itself when they have all these conferences, anything they sell. Also, a couple of hotels nearby. The Omni was a big part of this deal. The city or the convention center, like we have to subsidize that hotel because back when this deal was struck, it was the recession, and luring a very nice high-end hotel to downtown Nashville at that time was, I mean, now you could,
Sure. It
throw a
was
rock
harder
and
to
hit
do.
anyone.
So
Yeah.
we had to make it happen.
Yeah, so we had to make them a sweet deal, and that's still in place. But there's also these zones downtown where you draw a circle on a map, and they have these across the state in different cities and tourist areas where extra money is collected in this area, and it's dedicated to a certain purpose. So anyway, there are all these different funding streams. The goal is more or less, and obviously locals pay some of this money, but the goal is it's more tourism-related money that's going to pay for this sort of tourism-related infrastructure.
Right.
And we're getting to the end of that deal, and those revenue streams have collected way more than they were ever anticipated to collect. And there have been a few examples over the years where the cities tried to get money out of that under Mayor John Cooper.
Say like, hey, you're not using that
Yeah.
that pile of cash over there. Can we throw it at this?
Exactly. And the state kind of clamped down on that because, again, this is a partnership between the city and the state. The state had to create this tool, and the city had to implement it. But the state controls what it looks like, basically. So they said, no, that's not what this money's for. It's not for your general operations. It's just for the convention center. So we're getting to the end of that. We've collected way more money than we ever anticipated.
When you say way more money, like how much money are we talking about?
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
They're sitting on a surplus right now of $600 million, I believe. And the convention center, so part of the story is the convention center wants to expand. They conducted a study. It said they are missing out on, especially as Nashville's become much more of a destination, they're missing out on these extra large conventions that they can't host, even though, you and I probably, I mean, walking through the convention center, I'm like, you need a scooter to get from one end to the other.
It's huge, yeah.
But some of the biggest conventions need even more space than that. So they want to expand. They can do a lot of that on the site that they have. There's room, back rooms, I don't know exactly how it works, but that they can fill out and convert. But they also have bought up a few nearby properties in recent years with the idea that maybe they could expand across different streets and expand their footprint.
Yeah.
So the revenue streams that were put in place then, they expire at a certain point, basically when it's paid for. So the state passed this law, the legislature last year, that extends some of these revenue streams and allows that money to be used for a number of different things. One of them is the expansion of the convention center, which could cost $1 billion. One of them is using surplus money that's sitting there now, $300 million for the East Bank, which is unrelated. It's not part of any of these.
Right, but it's just they're saying we approve this use of it or whatever.
Yeah, because the state's also part of the East Bank. So $300 million for capital infrastructure projects on the East Bank, which the city sees as a benefit because a lot of that would be paid for in our normal capital budget process, which, is argued about every year. Every council member wants a piece of that. They want a new school. They want improvements to parks, new parks. There all kinds of things are on this roster of things the city wants to spend on. So taking some of the East Bank items off of that and using this convention center money for it would free up some money to be used elsewhere in the county. I think it's been listed as one of the benefits of this. There is so much more to this. Remind me what I've missed out on. Okay, one other thing. It allows the convention center debt to be refinanced, which currently Metro, which is not the Convention Center Authority, that's a separate entity. Metro is the backstop on some of this debt. That doesn't mean Metro's paying it. The convention center is paying it with all these revenues. Mm-hmm. But if some catastrophe happened,
we're the one guaranteeing it, basically.
And so that takes up a lot of the capacity that Metro has as a large government entity to issue debt. And so by refinancing, taking that backstop away, the city believes that they can set up an affordable housing bond. This is something we've talked about in past episodes, I think, during the budget process. The last 2 years, there's been a lot of talk about an affordable housing bond, which is where the city would use its capacious ability to issue debt to really push forward an affordable housing agenda in a way that rinky-dink grants here and there are building a few units here, a few units there. This would be a much larger effort. And so that's part of the benefit that the people pushing this legislation were advocating for. And then I guess one other thing I'll mention is there is one item that this money could eventually be used for once it's extended. And it's kind of the bottom of what they call the waterfall. So, first it's going to the convention center's budget operations, then it's going to the expansion, then, the 300 million is going across the river. And then there's a list of other things that if there's even more revenue than we imagine, this could be used for. There's money that's going to the city every year for public safety. I'm not really sure exactly what that'll look like, but about $20 million, and it grows every year. But down the line, there's also bringing large events to Nashville. So I assume that means when the Super Bowl comes and we have to pay for, security and all this other stuff, right, tearing up a sidewalk to fit in a whatever, and then rebuilding it, like money that could be used for that kind of stuff. Then at the very bottom of that list is this new fund that will be controlled by a new state board, and it's called the Joint Capital Tourism Board or something like that. And the mayor gets a seat on there, but it's mostly controlled by Republicans at the state level. And that could include grants to businesses in this tourist district. This was a response to a lot of the outcry about property taxes. Some of the businesses in the Lower Broad area saw especially large increases in their taxes because their property values had gone up so much, because the last time we assessed them was like during COVID, and when tourism businesses weren't valued as high.
Right.
So anyway, these could be grants that go to businesses like Tootsie's or Acme or whatever. That is the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, but it has generated a lot of attention because those grants would not be available to businesses across the river or out in the county.
Right. So I think you did a pretty good job of that.
How long did that take?
Now, also, I should say to our listeners, it's possible that I wouldn't know if you were completely wrong about all that. But the way I'm hearing it, there's kind of there's not only two, but like two sort of discussions that I'm thinking about here. One is, okay, the revenue streams that were set up to pay for the convention center have thrown off a lot more money than we were anticipating, and what might we want to do with that money or wish we could do with that money if the state would let us do it, and ditto for the extra money that might come in from the future. And then the other one is like, is it wise to, you saw people online who aren't so happy about this arrangement talking about this as we're building a second convention center because it's sort of like money-wise close to that. And so is like, Councilman Sean Parker at the meeting said, like, I'm worried we're repeating mistakes of the past basically by doing this kind of financial arrangement. So do you think that's a fair way to think of like two of the categories that were being debated about this? I mean, we could just spoil that the council did eventually pass this. Yeah, and there's a third vote on one of the measures, although it passed with a large enough margin that you have to assume that. So the bill that passed was the refinancing related bill, or there's a resolution? There was a resolution and a bill. One extends the
I don't know.
Yeah, we can cut that because I don't know either. But the point is, there was a resolution and a bill. There's still one final vote, but it was like 31-6 on the bill that passed related to this. So only a few people voting against it.
I think the key thing you said earlier when asking that question is if the state allowed us to. Because, yes, there are a lot of people in Metro who see this huge pile of money being collected and say we could use this for schools. It'd be great if we could build a park and build housing for people and all of this kind of stuff. Lower property taxes even.
Rebrand all of our mascots, just give them several different outfits.
But a key thing to remember is the state set this up and they're not really going to allow that. I mean, these specific tax streams, the hotel tax, the rental car, these sort of things, they make up a lot of the bulk of this pot of money, and the state set those up specifically for this purpose. And it's not like if the council said we don't want to build a new convention center, then this money would magically just go to the general fund or go to schools.
The state would still be in control, more or less, of what happens with that money.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Another bill that was on the council agenda that I had a story about and you also wrote about in your coverage was related to police drones. People may know the police department had this trial program of what's called a drone as a first responder program, where in the Madison precinct, they had a couple of drones that could be deployed to respond to emergency calls. And that trial ended. And actually just before that trial ended, but now it's ended and this legislation's moving through, Sandra Sepulveda introduced this legislation to pretty seriously restrict how the police department could use drones in the future. And that ended up passing on second reading of the council.
Second reading. So third reading will be at the first meeting in September.
And, did there end up being a lot of kind of debate around that at the council, or was that pretty...
The debate was fairly limited. There was discussion in committees, some back and forth with the police department's representative to the council, questions about how the program functioned. They're going to have a report that they write up in the next couple of weeks about the pilot. They did present to some council members in private last week or the week before to kind of show them how this was used. But there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth. It's second reading. There'll be a third and final vote. And I think, the first version of the bill was much more expansive, and it was substituted to be a little more narrow.
Right.
And I think that got a lot more council members on board.
Yeah, so the bill as it currently stands basically, one, makes it explicitly clear. A lot of folks in the community and some advocates and stuff have been arguing that the MNPD's trial drone program itself violated a existing law about surveillance technology that says that adopting surveillance technology requires a public hearing and Metro Council approval. That law, not to get too deep into it, but this bill would explicitly put drones and drone as first responder programs into that law. So if the police department wanted to create a more permanent program, it would need a public hearing and a Metro Council approval. But it also says that if they have one of those programs, it can only be used for like certain uses, right?
Yeah. And I do think that is true. I think that will continue to be discussed because, again, like you said, like this will have to come back to council if and when the police department tries to institute either a larger pilot or a countywide program. I think some of those uses will be debated,
right?
Because the Deputy Chief Gilder is his name. He's the representative from the police department to council. During the committee debate that I was talking about, he said that the list of uses described.
I think it's active shooter incident, hostage situation,
right.
Missing person.
And in the pilot, I think it was used for a broader,
right.
A broader sort of response.
List of things, yeah.
Like traffic accidents even and things like that. But he sort of said the department would prefer to be able to it wouldn't be a very effective drone as a first responder program if it were limited to those uses. So I expect that to continue to be a discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, people probably imagine this, but just so it's clear, I mean, we're talking about these drones as sort of visual, either surveillance or just camera. So the police officers aren't going to be able to get to the scene for 8 minutes, but a drone can get there in 2, and they're able to see footage or images of what's going on there. And so the police department's argument is that that's useful as you can imagine, they see it as useful in a ton of cases. I mean, this feels like it's the debate and the discussion that's happening around kind of a lot of these technologies, whether it's the license plate readers, which we've been talking about, whether it's Waymo cameras, which our colleague Sarah Grace Taylor wrote about this week, which is they have all these capabilities either in theory or in practice. And then some people will say, well, we don't like some of those. And then the people who support the technology or who are selling the technology will say, oh, well, we won't use it for that. But it's kind of like, well, it does have the capability to do that. An example with the police drones is they've told the council that the police department has told the council that the drones aren't recording while they're on their way to a scene. So it's not like you're getting this video recording of overhead the city for miles and miles. And I have no reason to believe sitting right here that that's not true, but it obviously could do that. It could do a lot of things. The Community Review Board had a report on this talking about the capability of these drones and the cameras on them, whether or not that's how they're being used here. They can read license plate readers. They can identify, see a person's face from 800 feet away or whatever. So,
and I think the legislation that we talked about does have a restriction on facial recognition.
Yes,
in addition.
I think prohibits facial recognition and also autonomous drones, which is a whole other part of this, because these drones that we're talking about the police used for the trial were piloted by a person at the precinct, whereas there are drones that would be like AI powered kind of. So you would literally have these. Skydio, who's the company that provided those drones that were used, they on their website, if you go to their website, one of their like headings literally is like a family of flying robots or something. Like they kind of lean into like the idea that this is a perk of this.
Skydio does sound like the company and sort of
it's got Torment Nexus vibes. If people are familiar with that meme, it's a little bit like it's very close to Skynet, which I think if you were a surveillance technology company, you would want to lean away from that. But who am I? We're probably need to get out of here soon, but I guess real quick, you also wrote about vice mayoral candidates and some people jumping into that race. Fill us in on that real quick.
Yeah, we're about a year out from Metro elections. We still don't know what those elections will look like because the Supreme Court should be ruling who knows when on this back and forth over the size of the council. The state has passed a law capping the Metro Council at 20 members. There's currently 40 members. So if that ruling comes back against Metro, then they'll have to scramble to come up with a new makeup. So that could affect vice mayor, that could affect at-large council. So it's really, I think, put sort of a freeze on a lot of the council members who could be running for either another office or for a second term, not knowing what districts look like or
how many seats there will be. Yeah.
So there's been a little bit of a freeze on that, but 2 council members did tell us that they're running for vice mayor. Angie Henderson, who's currently the vice mayor, is in her first term, so she could run for a second term. She told us she has got some key goals for her last year in office, and if she accomplishes those goals, then she's open to stepping back from the position. But she kind of had a sort of rah-rah message in the quote as well, which was, if she does run, she intends to win. But anyway, the 2 council members who've said
Same, by the way.
Well, it's interesting. Angie Henderson, she ran against an incumbent vice mayor herself 4 years or 3 years ago and beat Jim Schulman. It was a pretty tight race, but a pretty competitive one. And so that's a kind of interesting context and background. But the 2 council members are Zulfat Swara, who's an at-large representative, finishing her second term, so she's term limited in that seat, and Quante Toombs, who represents District 2 in the northern part of the county. She's in her second term as a district council member. She could run for at-large, but she's opting to run for vice mayor.
Got it. And I mean, the vice mayor is an interesting position, right? It's like a lot of the job is running the council meeting and herding cats in that way, but it's also can be pretty influential. You're making, committees and, sort of, you can have a lot of influence on the direction of the council or how it conducts itself. So it's still, a pretty powerful position, I guess.
You also break a tie every now and then.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare, but it happens.
They give you the big hammer, you get the gavel. So there's that.
Yeah. And in recent history, we've seen a vice mayor elevated to mayor. So it's not like that doesn't happen every now and then.
Yep, indeed. Well, I know along with mascots, movies, election chatter is another one of our shared interests. So I know we'll have plenty of more opportunities to talk about that.
When you called back to a story I'd written in 2021, I thought you were going to call back to my first mayoral chatter piece for the scene after the 2019 mayoral election.
Yes.
I did a preview of the 2023 mayoral election the day after.
Yeah, like
John Cooper
almost a
was
full 4 years ahead.
Sworn in, yeah.
Just amazing content. We got it. We used to really put stuff out around here. We got to get back to that.
Blogging.
Yep, just blogging, just showing up. And people, actually some people did know it. Some people would sometimes comment to us and say, did you write this because you had nothing else to write? And sometimes the answer was yes. But yeah, so there'll be more election announcements to come. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get together and talk about the size of the council once the Supreme Court decides what that's going to be. But for now, we'll let everyone go. You can subscribe to this podcast on the Banner & Company podcast feed. It's produced by Andrea Tudhope. Have a good day. We'll see you soon.